Hello everyone and welcome to the CSS Security mini briefing, where we will present a short summary of what was released today, March 9th, 2021. My name is Josh Daniel, and like I said, I'm on the CSS Security team here at Microsoft. We'll start this video with an overview of the release. We'll talk about an item with Exchange that was in the news, then we'll dive right into a few vulnerabilities. So when we look at the release all up, there's a lot of remote code execution vulnerabilities across the products. When we look at just Windows, this month, elevation of privilege has the larger number. But when we look at across the products, it's a big month for remote code execution vulnerabilities. So total, we're seeing 122 vulnerabilities being addressed this month, and that's a little higher than our average of 102 over the last 13 months. When we take a look at our critical vulnerabilities, we see 14 vulnerabilities this month that are being addressed, and our average there is around 15.9, so just a little low. As I mentioned though, remote code execution vulnerabilities, we have 45 this month across all the products, and that is well above our average of 29.3. Now, when we talk about the criticality of vulnerabilities, one thing we like to use is the CVSS scale, which is the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, and it goes from a numbering system between 0 and 10, with 10 being the highest criticality vulnerability. This month, we have a vulnerability that shows up as 9.9 on a scale of 10, so incredibly high. Our average of the high point that we see over the last 13 months is about 9.3. So just over half a point there. Again, this is a scale of 1 to 10. And on an average level, that's fairly significant. When we look at the average CVSS score across all the vulnerabilities, we see 7.62, whereas our average over the last 13 months is 7.2. So again, just about a half a point difference there. One other thing we like to look at when it comes to vulnerabilities in a release is the number publicly disclosed, which is at 2, and we average about 1.6, just a little bit above. However, when we look at vulnerabilities that are known to be exploited in the wild, typically we see less than 1. Our average is less than 1 over the last 13 months. However, this month we have 5. Now, 4 of those are with one issue, and another one is with a completely different issue. But still, that's 5 in a month. So the messaging here is lots of vulnerabilities, lots of critical vulnerabilities. Take a look at this month, and as per our usual advice, patch as soon as you can. So let's jump into our next section. This is the In the News section, where we talk about issues that may or may not be populating out there in news media or other social media channels. So one thing that got a lot of press was last week Microsoft released updates for Exchange and out-of-band updates. The key thing is here, last week when the updates were released, we only released security updates for the cumulative updates that are in support. So for example, that only was about 7 separate cumulative updates across Exchange 2019, 2016, 2013, and a defense in-depth fix for 2010. A lot of the feedback we got was that many customers were blocked from upgrading or had delays in upgrading to a supported cumulative update. So just yesterday, Microsoft released security fixes for 6 more cumulative updates that are out of support. And so what this means to you is that if you've been struggling to, say, get from 2019 CU4 up to CU8 or 9, now you can, in place, install the security update on CU4, CU5, and CU6 of Exchange 19, and CU14, 15, and 16 of Exchange 2016. You can install the security update on those 6 new SKUs as well. It does not fix any other security vulnerabilities that have been addressed through other cumulative updates. It's only a scoped patch fix for the vulnerabilities that were released last week for Exchange, except now for more products. So now we're including both in support products and out of support products, or we are releasing a fix for both in support and out of support products. So the go-do here is update Exchange as soon as you can. Once you are able to update Exchange, there's another action item here, and that's to look through your environment for signs of compromise. Go ahead and take a look. There'll be a link at the end of this presentation with a bunch of resources. One of those resources is the how to determine whether or not your environment has been compromised. We have indicators of compromise, multiple IOCs available. Take a look at the blog. There's a link down at the bottom, and you can see all the different IOCs, and you can check your environment. So it's really important that you not only install the updates to protect against future attacks, but you also look into your environment for previous attacks. This is known to be exploited out in the wild, so it's imperative that it's not just a patch and forget, it's a patch and investigate for signs of compromise. So that's a really important part. Again, the top level here is patch as soon as you can. If you're not on a supported cumulative update, we have released updates for 6 other cumulative updates that are out of support. Patch as soon as you can. Now, if you're asking, well, what about my favorite cumulative update that hasn't been released yet? The messaging right now is patch right away. Either get to a supported cumulative update, install the security update, or install the security update on your cumulative update that the patch has been released, or upgrade to a cumulative update where we released the security update yesterday. So CUs 4, 5, and 6 for 2019, and CUs 14, 15, 16 for Exchange 2016. Get to one of those, install the security update, and that's a partial, or that's a fix for the vulnerabilities, but it doesn't protect you from other vulnerabilities that may have been addressed since. So install the updates, look for signs of compromise. The first CVE we'll be talking about today is CVE-2021-26867, and this is with DNS Server. There's actually 5 separate vulnerabilities being addressed this month in the DNS Server stack, but we'll talk about this one because it's representative of the set. This is remote code execution vulnerability, listed as critical, privately disclosed, no known exploits out in the wild. As we can see on the right, it's all versions of all supported versions of server from 2012 all the way up to 2019 and the newer versions of server. So base score here 9.8 on a scale of 10. So that should be ringing alarm bells. If you have DNS, this alone should make you perk up and get those DNS servers updated as soon as possible. As we can see here, no privileges required and no user interaction. So it's real low attack complexity here. There is a slight hiccup, if you will, or a mitigation, but it's only a partial mitigation. You can enable secure zone updates, and that can block the initial source of attack. However, again, it's only a partial mitigation. The full mitigation is install the update, but if you can't do that right away, there is that mitigation. Great, so let's move on to our next vulnerability. This one's with Hyper-V. This is CVE-2021-26867. This is another remote code execution vulnerability listed as critical, privately disclosed, and no known exploits out in the wild. Now, this affects a smaller subset of operating systems. As we can see, it's Windows 10, but it's also the server versions 1909, 2004, and 20H2. So that's a nice thing because it's not across the entire fleet of supported server or desktop SKUs. Now, with that said, when we take a look at the score here, this is a 9.9. I mean, on a scale of 10, that's extraordinarily high. So it demands attention. One other thing to point out here is that this only affects Hyper-V clients that are configured to use the Plan 9 file system. So if you're not using Plan 9 file system on your VMs, this is something you don't need to pay attention to. Now, the updates are in the cumulative update for Win 10 and server here. So there's no extra leaps that you have to go through if you are using Plan 9. But if you are using Plan 9, I would highly recommend prioritizing the updates for those VMs and get them updated as soon as possible. Because again, this is a 9.9, and a key note here is that an authenticated attacker that uses this vulnerability would be able to have the right to execute code on the Hyper-V server. So that's breaking that security boundary between client and server. So it's really important. You have a VM running Plan 9, get that thing updated as soon as you can. All right, and finally, for our third vulnerability that we'll be covering in this mini briefing, this is CVE-2021-26867, and this is with Internet Explorer. So this affects Internet Explorer 9, 11, and also the HTML-based version of Edge pops up as an affected product. So this is a remote code execution vulnerability listed as critical, and this was publicly disclosed, and exploitation was noted out in the wild. So this has a CVSS base score of 8.8, attack vectors over the network, attack complexity is low, doesn't require user privileges, but it does require user interaction. So that's a slight little speed bump, if you will, that someone has to click on a link, convince to click on a link somehow. So that's, like I said, a slight speed bump mitigation there. And then the link out at the bottom, we'll talk more about the publicly disclosed part. All right, and that brings us to a close for our March mini briefing video. Thank you for your time. I do want to point to a few of the resources that we have. The security update guide is the authoritative place for anything CVE with Microsoft. So if something changes overnight, the authoritative location is always going to be the security update guide. So take a look at that. It's also going to list out what products are affected for each individual vulnerability. There's FAQs in those CVE articles and a wealth of information if you're curious. I also have some links to some exchange focused issues, talking about what products are supported, talking about the issue itself. And then there's also the threat intelligence blog, which gives you the indicators of compromise that you'll need so that you can investigate your own environments for any kind of compromise. All right. So with that, I want to thank everyone, appreciate your time, and I will talk to you next month.